All right, it is Monday, and I am here with the incomparable Sunny Hostin. Hello, Sunny.
Hi, Brian.
Welcome behind the table.
Thank you.
All right, the big news of the weekend, which was that the United States struck 3 nuclear sites on Saturday.
Yeah.
We had ABC News' John Carl here with us this morning to break it all down.
Yeah.
Always helpful to have him here.
Mm-hmm.
What was your initial reaction when you heard the news? I was in the middle of a Mission Impossible movie, and
Oh, my gosh.
it was kind of on the nose.
Yeah, it's ominous. I was surprised because the president said that he was looking at diplomatic options and that he would be looking at that for about 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And within, I think, 2 days, all of a sudden, we're involved in bombing another country. And he ran on no more wars.
Right.
He ran a really isolationist
There were signs saying if you elect
platform.
Kamala Harris, your kids will be going to war, that kind of thing. Yeah.
And I think that's just surprised me because I think his base wanted I don't agree that we should be an isolationist country because geopolitics matter to me, and I think that we're all connected and our economies are connected, and anyone that studies it knows that. But I also am, as you know, very anti-war.
Mm-hmm.
I think diplomacy it gets us farther than anything else. So I was disappointed. I was surprised. I think it's scary, especially for people who have children and loved ones, husbands, wives that are in the military.
Right.
I think it's a very scary time. I have several people in my family that have served, and I know what it's like to get the call from the family member that says they're going to war. And so I know that this administration is saying that this is not war, but Iran seems to think it is.
Right.
And Iran released a statement saying, everybody will pay. I'm paraphrasing, but something like that. And I'm starting to think, why am who is everybody?
Yeah.
And so I was very disappointed.
No, it's scary. Now, one big conversation that's happening now is whether there was a legal ability to do this in the first place. And it's clear that presidents have certainly stretched throughout history, whether or not.
Well, of course, I did a deep dive into that,
Yeah.
right? And it's clear that in order to declare war, you do need Congress.
Right.
You need congressional approval, and that's for a reason. But presidents, as you've mentioned, have stretched that war resolution so that it's very, very thin now. No one really adheres to it, unfortunately. What is a declaration of war?
Right.
And so there are all these exceptions that seem to fit pretty nicely here. I will say this, though, in looking at international law.
Yeah, you said this on the show.
I think it's pretty clear that this is a violation of international law. It has to be, you have to sort of, if you want to preeminently act in this way and drop bombs on another country, there has to be an immediate threat. And I don't think by any stretch of the imagination that President Trump can fit that definition. His actions fit that definition. I mean, was there an immediate threat of nuclear war with the United States coming from Iran?
According to our intelligence, no.
According to our intelligence, no. Historically, no. And so this is a violation of international criminal law. The question is, who's going to hold him to account? And this is the one area that really is disturbing, because there is a rule of law both in this country and abroad for a reason, to maintain civilization. And when you're talking about, bombing innocents, because for certain innocent people will die, I'm just very disturbed by it.
All right, well, let's move on to something else that's also disturbing, but in a different way. This Sean Diddy Combs trial.
I know.
You've been following it like nobody else. You've been in the courtroom.
I've been in the courtroom.
It's expected that the prosecution is going to rest this week. So
they're going to rest on Tuesday, and the jury will be charged on Wednesday, and summations begin Thursday. And I can't believe it, because the defense announced that they would not be putting on any witnesses. No witnesses on the stand except for admitting some evidence. And you know what that tells me? They think they won.
Wow.
They think they won. And having sat in the courtroom for a couple weeks now, this was a really good defense. It was a really good defense. And Perhaps the prosecution overcharged, charging racketeering. I've said it before. I was a federal prosecutor doing sex crimes and trafficking. I would not have prosecuted this as a RICO case. In terms of the sex trafficking, the prosecution's last witness is somebody from Homeland Security, and he's basically going through a lot of hotel invoices, and trying to prove that Jane, she's testifying under a pseudonym, but one of Diddy's ex-girlfriends was sex trafficked because prostitutes were brought, in and out of state, in and out of the country. But when Jane testified, she said she wanted to participate in many of them. She chose some of the escorts, paid, she willingly took drugs. And so I think, I always say the prosecution defense only needs one witness to have reasonable doubt. The prosecution needs all 12 not to have any reasonable doubt. So I don't see how there isn't one person on that jury that is thinking sex trafficking. I don't see it. Racketeering. I don't see it. Perhaps transporting people, prostitutes for sex. Perhaps that's the Mann Act. That's the one that got Governor Spitzer. But he didn't spend the rest of his life in prison, did he?
Right. No.
So there you have it.
It's interesting because before you attended the trial, early on when we talked about this, you said something that stuck with me, and you said this before, that generally speaking, federal prosecutors don't put a case like this together unless they feel like they have it.
Absolutely.
And so are you surprised?
I'm surprised. Yeah. I was, look, it's James Comey's daughter, Maureen, who I know, and she's leading the prosecution. She's doing a great job. But racketeering is really hard to prove. I worked with G. Robert Blakey, who wrote the statute. I was his research assistant. I know how hard that statute is. And the government has been pretty successful in prosecuting criminally some of these sort of, ragtag criminal organizations and fitting it into a RICO enterprise. But the RICO statute is about mob activity. Right. I don't see how Bad Boy Enterprises worked as a mob to help Diddy have hotel nights and freak-offs. It doesn't fit the statute. But the sex trafficking doesn't seem to fit either. And so, prosecutors, I think, win about 97% of their cases. So they go to trial.
Celebrity always confuses things a little bit, I'm sure.
Celebrity confuses things a bit. And this case is something unlike I have ever seen before. Right. It really has been kind of crazy. And I think some people will just think, well, this is the swinging lifestyle. The jury has heard so much, Brian, testimony about celebrities, how they party, that this sort of swinging lifestyle and having orgies and taking drugs is just kind of part of it. A lot of the women said, yeah, he introduced me to voyeurism and the swinging lifestyle. And I was into it at first until I realized that 90% of our relationship would be that. But they were kind of okay with it at first because they just thought that maybe that was the lifestyle. So this shroud of celebrity is all over this case. I'm going to very different
parties than
I am too. Yeah. I'm not going to these parties.
No,
I don't
you're a
know.
celebrity. You've been to parties. You go to good parties.
I go to pretty good parties.
Yeah, I don't get it. All right, so taking your legal hat off and just putting the sunny hat back on, let's say he does get off.
Yeah.
What does he have a career after this? What do you think?
No,
I mean, what does his life look like?
No, he doesn't have a career.
He's still off everybody's playlists?
He's off everybody's
playlist.
playlist.
More Money, More Problems anymore?
No, he's not going to be performing at any award shows. I think he leaves the country. I think his legacy has become this. I was speaking to a group of Gen Zers, and they're it's become part of the vernacular. Oh no, hope you didn't get diddied. Yeah. I mean, it's become like that.
Wow.
And I think he has to go away a la
R. Kelly.
R. Kelly's in prison, but it's over.
That's right, R. Kelly's in prison now. I forgot.
It's over.
And I have to say, of course, John Combs has pled not guilty to all of the charges.
Yes.
It'll be interesting for sure.
It's going to be interesting. I'll be in the courtroom on Thursday.
Oh, great. I look forward to the firsthand reporting as always. All right, we have a listener question from Michelle.
Okay.
She says, with so many high-profile court cases in the news, what do you think is the most misunderstood aspect of the American justice system? That's interesting.
I think the most that's a great question. I think the most misunderstood aspect of it is how powerful the prosecution is. That position. People seem to think the judge is the most powerful person in the courtroom because the judge sort of running a trial and the judge imposes sentences. But what they don't realize is things, in terms of criminal law at least, things don't even go to trial unless a prosecutor decides it's going to. Imagine the power of that. That prosecutor decides whether or not the case even begins. So I think the prosecutor is the most powerful person in a criminal courtroom, in a criminal trial. I also believe that in terms of the judicial system, the Supreme Court is so misunderstood because it's shrouded in secrecy, because there are no cameras in the courtroom. You don't get to see the process. You get to read the opinions. You don't get to hear their discussions. They don't talk publicly about any of the cases, yet they decide the rule of law for our land. So
there's been a lot of talk about actually adding more transparency to that process.
There has been. I've testified in front of Congress about it. I think that federal courtrooms should have cameras. I think the Supreme Court should have cameras. The Supreme Court, I will say, there are audio tapes.
Right.
But it's just not the same, because I've been in the courtroom. I'm a member of the Supreme Court bar. I've been in the courtroom when people are arguing cases. There is nothing like being there and actually seeing the dynamic and seeing the justices ask questions.
Do you think cameras would have a negative impact for the way they...
Well, that's the argument, that the justices will somehow become actors, and somehow, the litigants will somehow be
it's not
more
a surprise.
showy.
We know how they vote, so there's no...
I don't think that is accurate.
Okay.
And I think, unfortunately, it's history just seems to have its hold on how the Supreme Court practices and engages, and it's unfortunate.
Now, you made a few headlines over the weekend, and
did I?
Not for the
I'm not really
reasons.
on social media like that anymore.
No, but this was about your allergic reaction on the show last week.
Yes,
which we had a little fun with, but it was actually incredibly serious and scary.
I was looking at the video, and I had a panic attack.
Yeah.
I was actually panicking, and the reason I wrote the note to Alyssa was because that was my death note. That was like, if I went into anaphylactic shock,
we know what's happening.
I wanted everybody to know what was happening. And, I think I freaked her out. She was like, oh, no.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, yes. I looked at you.
You did. No, we made eye contact, and I mouthed, is everything okay?
And I said no.
And I still didn't know what was happening.
What was happening was my tongue was like getting bigger and swelling, and my lips were swelling and burning.
For the record, next time, get up, get out of the chair, and let people know what's going on.
I didn't want to mess up Debbie's book.
No, and the food was great. To be clear, it was not Debbie's fault. I want to be clear about this.
No, but if I would have gone into ran off set, that would have become the story instead of her book at that moment. And I didn't want to take that away from her as an author myself.
That was very kind of you.
I didn't want to do that to her.
This stuff is really scary because it can get worse each time you get exposed to something like that. And
my mother reminded me I was hospitalized at 5 because of it.
Yeah.
And then my husband reminded me when he found out about it, he was like, you were hospitalized 10 years ago because of this. So it hasn't really gone away. And what I will say, because so many of my friends texted me, my friend Regina texted me, she was like, what? Walnuts? Because my family and my close friends know about this. I used to carry, and she said, where was your pen? I did, but I am so careful about asking what is in something. And because most people know, I've worked here almost 10 years.
Sure.
My assistant knows. And so she was running saying she's allergic to walnuts.
Oh my goodness.
But somehow it just got lost in translation. And it was just an accident. It just got lost in translation. So I trusted that there wouldn't be any walnuts. Thank God Alyssa said, are there walnuts in here? Because
otherwise you wouldn't have known why you were reacting that way.
No, I felt funny, but I just didn't even think of it.
And so this is during a live taping of the show.
Yes,
so the commercial break, we have people running for Benadryl, running to get the nurse, EpiPens.
Did I look as terrified as I felt?
Yeah, you did.
I did?
I was very nervous.
I was
off camera, especially.
I was terrified. I was pacing.
I was afraid your throat was going to close up.
I was terrified.
In my family, there's a young child in my family who has a very, very, as severe as it can be, reaction to tree nuts and nuts.
It's bad.
And it's, you don't sit down at any restaurant without having a 10-minute conversation with the waiter.
Manny always does have that conversation.
And if they don't seem like they're taking it seriously enough, you get up and you go somewhere else.
Manny does that with me.
You can't mess around.
He does. Yeah. He experienced one time I was eating and I don't even like key lime pie, but I was eating a key lime pie, and Manny said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Why?" And he was like, "Your face looks funny." And my eyes were almost swollen shut.
Oh my goodness.
And my mouth was huge. And he asked the waiter rushed over and he said, "Are there walnuts?" And the waiter said, "I don't think so." And then he said, "But let me check." And then the waiter comes back and says, "The entire crust is made of walnuts?" I was like,
oh my gosh.
I couldn't even taste it. Like, you got to tell people that the crust is made. So we ran out of the restaurant.
Well, one of the scariest things
and went to the
about
hospital.
reactions like that is it's not always the same reaction.
No.
I mean, it could be much worse.
Yes,
it could be
that
newly
one was
worse.
bad.
Like,
The
yeah,
one
so-
I had on the show was pretty mild in
'cause you
comparison
don't even
to
know
the
if
one I
you
had 10
swallowed
years
it,
ago.
which is great.
I'm not sure because I don't like red onions, and so there were red onions in it, and I was flicking out the red onions, but I can't see either because I refuse to wear glasses.
Yes.
So
For those who ask why she holds her cards up like she does. That's
I
why.
must have been flicking the walnuts with the onions. Do people actually talk about that,
Yes.
about the cards?
Yes.
I can't see people.
Let's talk about this actually because you are a beautiful woman
Thank you, Brian.
with or without glasses on, with or without contacts or whatever you would need. Why will you not wear glasses and make your life easier sometimes?
Vanity.
But that's ridiculous. You look great with glasses. Stylish glasses. You're stylish.
I don't want to do it.
All right.
I don't know. So I can't. So my cards are usually really very thick
Yeah.
and black.
Not quite the Joy level font,
no,
but it's
but
it's
they're
up there.
big, and when they're dark, I can.
Yes.
If they're here, if it's here, I can see it. If
Yeah.
it's here, it's a little more.
Well, the funny thing is, I know you could read them without even looking at them if you wanted to. That's the other thing. But
I try to memorize some
I
of
know
the
you
things
do.
now.
I know you
because-
do. All
because
right.
of my sight.
I'm just saying, I think you should make yourself comfortable. That's all. All right. We have another viewer question here. It's from Brett about your time on the show.
Yeah.
Sonny, looking back, how do you think you have grown on the show?
Oh, I've grown a lot.
I think so too.
I've grown a lot. I'm more comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
I'm less sort of. I'm a lawyer. I'm a little. I'm more giving of myself in terms of my personal life. I'm actually a very private person, as you know. I'm pretty private, and I'm not introverted, but I'm private. So I've had to learn how to put myself out there in ways I normally wouldn't. And I also just don't take the social media stuff very seriously.
Right. Which is that was evolved over time.
Yeah, I notice with new hosts, they read everything about themselves. And I have learned, Whoopi told me from the beginning not to do it. And I have learned that if you do read the stuff, you tend to try to change your positions so that people will like you.
Yeah.
And you just can't do that. You have to be really authentic about it.
100%.
And I have also found that, like, on social media, they like take a snippet of something and then they twist it. And so people that are not even watching the show are reacting to something that's not what happened.
The majority of the people that are reacting are the people that weren't watching.
They're
Yes.
not watching it. And so they're reacting to things that weren't even said or were said, they take it out of context. So I have learned through time, like, not to even look at it because, I firmly believe everything that I say, and I know I'm a good person and I know I'm morally centered. So it just doesn't matter. I think that's been the biggest change in terms of not needing
It's a weight off
to
you a
do
little
that.
bit. Yeah.
Yes, huge weight.
Yeah,
I know.
I think that's right.
I come in and you tell me what's
Well,
happening.
I read everything and I hate it. I don't know why I read everything. I mean, I do. It's my job.
Yeah.
But I need to be aware. But
I don't read any. I read news,
Right.
but I don't read anything about myself.
Yeah. No. Well, now that I'm starting to read stuff about myself. So
No, I don't
Yeah.
do it. Don't do it,
No,
Brian.
it's
not worth it.
it's brutal. That's all right. I'll shake it
People
off.
are like, they're just like keyboard courage thugs.
Yeah,
It just doesn't matter.
All right. Well, on that note, thank you for joining me today, Sonny.
Thank you, Brian.
Tomorrow I'll be back with Joy Behar. She's
She's
off,
so funny.
and she was off last week, so she needs
That's right.
she needs to come back firing. So we'll be happy to have her back. And Whoopi's in Italy enjoying.
I'm so jealous.
Did you see that award she got? Though it was
Yes.
like in a Coliseum.
It was
incredible.
gorgeous, and she had
Yeah.
heels on. Did you notice that?
I did notice that.
Yeah,
Yes.
she
So,
looks good.
all right. Thank you guys very much, and we'll see you tomorrow.